Well, welcome everyone. So glad to see everybody. Just wanted to introduce our amazing speakers and welcome you all to the Colorado Proud and Climate Smart Market Expansion Project's webinar today. We have Luke Richards from Downforce Technologies, Todd Olander from Shoot Malting, Jake Gefell from Tumbleweed Bread, and Sarah Jones from Jones Farms Organics. And just a couple of things, if when our presenters are speaking, if you just keep your microphones muted, it just helps eliminate background noise. We welcome and encourage questions. So raise your hand using the little hand icon or physically raise your hand or type your questions in the chat and we'll make sure that it gets addressed. And of course, we're going to ask for questions after each speaker and then again at the end. So feel free. We want you to engage with these amazing people. And then if you do come up with questions after the webinar, feel free to reach out to these guys or reach out to me, Barb Howe. This is my email address, barb.howe@state.co.us. And I want to thank everybody for joining. I'm going to stop sharing my slides and just introduce our folks. We're going to start out talking with Jake and Sarah. And Jake Gefell is with Tumbleweed Bread. Tumbleweed Bread was established in 2018 by head baker Jessica Lariva. And she started small. She was baking from home under the Cottage Foods Act and sold small quantities at pop-ups and farmers markets. We're super excited. Tumbleweed Bread is very grateful for the support and looks forward to the release of projects supported by the Climate Smart Expansion Project. So we're excited to hear from Jake. We also have Sarah Jones. And Sarah Jones co-owns Jones Farms Organics, a fourth-generation Centennial family farm located in the San Luis Valley here in Colorado, and the first regenerative organic certified farm in the state of Colorado. They grow over 20 varieties of specialty potatoes, heirloom wheat and rye, buckwheat, millet, oats, and peas, as well as multi-species cover crops for grazing. Well, welcome, you guys. I'm so excited to have you here. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you get started, Jake and Sarah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I guess I'll start by introducing what kind of stimulated our discussion to apply for, or rather solicit for these funds. The San Luis Valley right now is going through a bit of a water crisis. The entire economy is based on our agriculture. All of our agriculture needs water to work, and our snowpack has been dwindling for many years, and climate change generally has left just everything very, very dry. And without precipitation, without the snowpack, our aquifers are starting to dwindle. And classically, our primary crops, potatoes, barley, and alfalfa, they do use a lot of water. We, as Tumbleweed Bread, as bakers, we decided to apply for this because what we utilize generally uses less water. Our crops, ancient grains or rye or perhaps millet or even dry beans, all of those use substantially less water and they are generally better for the soil. So we decided to apply for this or solicit these funds in the couple of projects that we've been considering for some time but didn't quite have the resources to make happen. I guess we could go over to Sebi. She's working on specifically rye as part of the solution, and she would be able to kind of elaborate what they're doing up there with rye. That I can introduce some projects we've been working on with the funds that we received.
Okay, sounds good, Jake. I'll keep it short and sweet and talk about our rye resurgence project for a couple of minutes. Yeah, so we got introduced to Jake and Jess here as our amazing local bakers. We actually met at the farmers market when we first moved down to the farm to start farming with the family. And with the rye project, my father-in-law had started growing rye in the 80s as a cover crop. It's one of our only crops that can survive our harsh winters here in the San Luis Valley. So we're really, really high elevation and get really cold winters. And by cold winters, I mean we can often be the national low. So one of the coldest places in the country, -20 and -30 are not unheard of down here. So as you can imagine, finding a crop that can survive that is pretty incredible. So my father-in-law, Rob Jones, in the 80s would plant rye after potato harvest. So potato harvest just wrapped up down here. That means that there is a lot of bare dirt. As Jake had mentioned, potatoes, alfalfa, and barley are our main cash crops down here in the San Luis Valley, and also some of the hardest on our aquifer and on our soil. So he was planting rye just to do the right thing, just to cover our soil with protect all of the living organisms, to have a living root in the soil, and luckily it uses significantly less water. So a lot of farmers right now are starting to plant that crop right now. And then in the spring, when the wind is blowing really hard down here and we are experiencing more and more brownouts or dust storms, similar to what we saw during the Dust Bowl, we now get to have a beautiful protection to keep the soil in place, and it's becoming more and more common. But the biggest factor, as we know, with farmers is that we can plant a lot of things, we can grow a lot of things, but if we can't sell those things, they're essentially worthless. So the Rye Resurgence Project started last year with a team of us trying to help sell and market and get the word out on the benefits of rye, the nutrition of rye, the deliciousness of rye, and all of the amazing ways it can be used in whiskey, beer, bread, cookies. Some of the best cookies I've ever had were chocolate chip cookies. The best brownies are 100% whole rye brownies. It doesn't taste like caraway seed, and we need more Coloradans and more Americans to be purchasing rye, specifically from America and from Colorado. So that is the big part of the Rye project. Yeah, so I'm going to hand it, I think, maybe back to you, Jake, to get more into the specifics on the collaboration and the specifics on the grant.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so specifically in support of rye, we've been in R&D on a project for some years, and I can't give away details because I don't know specifically trademark stuff yet. We're doing this all ourselves from the ground up. But essentially, these funds allowed us to buy a high volume label printer, a bunch of labels, a lot of packaging, and then some of the baking molds that we need for this product. This is meant to scale up to much larger markets. So, in thinking of a crop that we could support, we chose rye as the primary crop that we would support and create essentially a food that could be scaled to a proper new sector of our economy down here in support of the future and lower water use and just more responsible crops, because climate change is just, it's hitting hard for us right now, and we have to act. And that's why we're kind of scrambling to move as fast as we can. And secondary to that, we started San Luis Valley Grain and Bean. That's a brand that will be doing basically dry goods distribution. We have 2 stone mills now, and we're going to start milling some of the varieties of wheat that Mountain Mama Milling doesn't mill. That's our primary mill down here. And we're going to start packaging some other things like beans and millet. And I think I shared a picture of the millet dehuller we got. I emailed that. I don't know if you guys would be able to put it up on the screen.
Yeah, Jake, I'll put it up while you're talking.
Awesome. Perfect. So one of the big pieces of infrastructure equipment we managed to get was a millet dehuller, which is the last line of equipment necessary to take millet, which is a superfood and a really low water use crop. It's the last kind of piece of equipment necessary to get it ready for human consumption. And that piece will help the Joneses and any other farms in the San Luis Valley be able to finish the millet, basically pull the hull off of it so that it's, yeah, there it is, so that it's available, bioavailable to humans. But that piece of equipment, it seems small and it might seem, a little strange looking, but that is extremely important to make millet a viable crop. And this solicitation allowed us to get a refurbished piece fixed, and it's going to be housed at Jones Farms Organics. And anyone who needs to use it, who wants to grow millet and kind of think about climate smart crops in the future, they're going to have access to that. And that will provide basically a whole new market for a whole new crop. Just that piece of equipment right there. It's a big development. And then we want to utilize that millet to sell. And we're not sure how we want to do that yet. We have a wholesale network that's interested in it, but we're thinking much bigger than that. And that's the whole point of developing a market, is to, at least in our eyes, is to think just beyond, like, just our neighbors right here in the valley, but think to much bigger markets. And that's how we might be able to support these low water use crops and build a viable economy for the future for the valley. And Sarah, would you like to introduce what's the last piece? We have the self-serve program. That was, I think, the last piece of the self-serve totes.
Yeah, I can touch on that really quick. Yeah, so one of our issues with the farm, or struggles with the farm, and Todd can probably talk about this, is sort of being middle scale or larger scale, meaning we're not so small and nichey that if a farmer, if someone calls up and is like, hey, I want a couple pounds, of potatoes or millet or rye, we struggle with that scale of things. George Witten, one of my favorite local rancher beef producers down here, says, you want to make me angry, you call me up and ask me for a couple pounds of beef. Kind of joking, but kind of not. It's really hard to service the local community at that scale. And so one idea we had, when we're cleaning grain, we're trying to be very efficient and do the largest amount as possible. But then once you clean it, you want to put it in super sacks, a tote. And then it immediately is really no longer, mice become an issue. And so finding the way to sort of navigate that. So one idea we had was a hard plastic tote with a lid on it, which essentially is mouse proof, or really as mouse proof as we're going to get here. Making a stand for it with, an auger type, I'm blanking on the word right this second. If someone wants to throw a word at me, a lever, and then
Hopper.
we can have, say that again.
I think it's a hopper system.
Yeah, hopper. But and everyone can kind of bring their own containers and have, let's say, 4 different hard-sided plastic bins with cleaned product, right? So millet, buckwheat, rye, maybe a hard red winter wheat, clearly labeled. And then we can advertise with where it's located, in a public location, but open, so people don't have to come, and then come and bring their own container and load up whatever they're looking for, shoot us a text with the amount that they got, and mail us a check, so that they don't feel like, sort of they're bugging us or interrupting our day, but that we can have some of these amazing grains that we're growing available to the community at the scale. So like Jake and Jess, for example, bring, their Rubbermaid bins and different size containers, and might load up, 500 pounds or 1,000 pounds. Or the local baker next door might just bring and load up, 10 or 15 or 20 pounds. So we all kind of came up with that together on, what might be the most useful for our local community and at-home bakers and commercial bakers, but sort of that small to mid-scale option, which I think will be great. And then we also got a countertop mill. So we are opening up a farm store coming soon. It'll be called the Hooper Junction Mercantile next to a cafe on a main highway. And I am planning on setting up this Nutrimill on a counter with some bins of berries. And really for the first time ever, down here, people will be able to mill fresh flour as well. So you could even go and load up, the grains that you wanted, and then come similar to really most grocery stores that you go to. You can buy bulk coffee beans and mill it and bag it, grind it and bag it right then and there. But I've never seen that with a mill. So we're going to give it a try and really educate people on milling fresh, milling different types of grain berries and rye berries, and then get to bake different recipes that we'll have available as well. So that's a really fun piece of the project that became available thanks to this grant and all of us thinking, putting our heads together.
Yeah, and
That's
thank you
really
guys all
exciting.
very much for believing in this work. It's going to be very important for us. There's going to be some serious change in the valley, and we need to be prepared, and we need to be thinking to the future. And yeah, it might not seem like a lot, but it allowed us to get some key pieces of equipment in place to kind of give us the best chance we got to pivot away from high water use crops. But I'm actually, my laptop's about to die, so I think I might need to sign off.
Well, thank you, Jake. Excellent job. Be exciting to see the next steps.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. And you guys have a great day.
Well, does anybody have any questions for Sarah? Feel free to come off mute and ask, or raise your hand, or put it in the chat. Any of the options. Well, I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, go for it, Jody.
I'll jump in. I'm sorry.
Go.
So how are you going to communicate the kind of grains you're going to be milling? Like, is it in a newsletter? I think it's like the coolest thing I've ever heard.
Thank you. Yeah, that is a great question. We don't do a farm newsletter. Great idea. I'll add it to my to-do list. But Instagram, Facebook, once the store is open and up, and once the self-service totes are up, which just means we need to build the foundations for them so they can be raised above the ground and just safe and solid, which is next on Michael's to-do list after harvest is officially wrapped up. Yeah, so I would say probably social media, and it will be, blasted like now open, now available, here's the store hours for the actual milling of that piece. And then for the self-service piece, probably word of mouth a little bit, maybe also on Facebook. And then that one will be like 24/7. So if it was like midnight and someone was jonesing for some rye berries, they could just show up and load it up and weigh it and send us a check. So that one's nice. It's really self-serve, so we don't have to micromanage that at all, which is kind of every farmer's dream, I think, to not have to micromanage something. Thank you for your question. And for you, Jody, I will send you a personal text.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Sarah. I'm going to read one other question that's in the chat. And this is from Peter. He's asking if you had to provide any estimates on the revenue benefits of the millet machine. So I think he's asking sort of in terms of the project and the funding that we provided.
Is that a question for you guys, or is that a question for did Jake have to provide you?
Mm-hmm. As part of the proposal.
Yeah, I'm assuming it was a yes. Jake and Madeline really worked on the details and the grant writing. I just kind of got to talk and stand back and cross my fingers and hoped we got the funding. I wasn't super involved in the nitty gritty, other than I know that my father-in-law, I mean, we were reaching out really all over the US to see if there was a small scale option for millet deholing. So we definitely, there was like probably 15 of us involved in actually going out and seeing if this was already an option available that made sense for us to be able to use to dehole. So we didn't have to, ship and transport our stuff a long distance. And then in terms of the specific revenue, I would say Jake and Madeline probably provided that dollar amount and what the potential revenue was for Jake and Jess to be able to get millet deholed locally. And I know water was a huge piece of that too, just the water savings for them to be able to use millet that was grown local and add a value to a crop that we wanted to grow and could grow and use less water, just didn't have that piece in the infrastructure was a big part of that as well. I hope that answered your question. But if you feel free to email me and I can put you in contact with Madeline and Jake directly to get more info on that if I didn't answer it.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And I'll just add that, Peter, we do ask for a final report for those who were awarded funds for this project. So some of that information comes out in the final report, but in submitting proposals, any information that you have about the potential impact to the market, if you have, previous sales data, then, you could please submit that as part of your proposal. The more information, the better. And I will hand it back over to you, Barb.
Great information. Well, any other questions for Sarah? And we'll come back to her later. So if you think of something, don't hesitate. You can put it in the chat and we'll certainly get to it. Our next two presenters are Luke Richards. Luke is a former civil engineer who shifted his focus to soil health 7 years ago. As head of product and business development in the Americas at Downforce Technologies, he combines environmental science with business strategy to scale soil health solutions across farmland investments and food and beverage supply chains. His goal is to make soil health the central cog in sourcing strategy and property valuation. We also have Todd Olander, and Todd is a fifth-generation farmer and first-generation maltster. That's a mouthful, Todd. I'm just going to say. He was raised on his family's farm, and he has combined traditional legacy with cutting-edge regenerative practices, making him a trailblazer in the movement for a resilient agricultural future. Beyond the field, he opened Shoot Malting in 2016, a craft malt house that not only links farmers to the craft beverage industry, but promotes the importance of traceability and environmental responsibility in agricultural products. Well, you guys, thank you so much and welcome. I hand it over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Barb. Thank you for that kind intro. We have a short deck to share today. So I'm just going to play around with a couple buttons, get sharing. But yeah, looking forward to sharing sort of the outcomes from our project with you all. That should be coming through. Can you see the screen now? Yep. Success. Fantastic.
Looks great.
To a good start. Brilliant. So for this presentation, a little bit different to what we just heard from Sarah and Jake, in that what we've sort of got in our project is a situation where Todd and Emily and the team at Olander Farms and Root Shoot have already done a lot of incredible climate smart and regenerative work on farm. And so our project is more about supply chain connectivity and impact verification to help with storytelling and help access new markets, access consumers, or access, different supply chain actors. So for our presentation today, what we're going to try and do is take you from the journey from the farm. So you'll hear from Todd next about all the work that he's done out on the farm, all the way through to the supply chain perspective, where our friends at New Belgium, they were a key project partner. and we'll learn sort of what were some of the motivators for them as a representative brewer. And then we'll round out with the actual project findings, and the role that Downforce Technologies, the company I work for, what role did we play in this project, and where are we hoping to take things with Todd and the Root Shoot team and Walker Modic at New Belgium Brewing. So that's the plan of attack for us. Please ask questions, as we go at the end, whatever you fancy. But before I get any further, thank you again to Colorado Department of Ag for the funding for this project, because I think a lot of this work, the verification work at least, probably couldn't be done without the financial assistance. So that being said, I'll hand over to hear from the main man, Todd.
All right. Thanks, Luke. So, yeah, I'll just give you guys a little bit of background about what we're up to, and why we thought that this would be a great project. And yeah, so I guess we have about 1,500 acres here in Loveland Berthoud area that we farm on. Like 90% of that the farmland is actually leased. So we're in a different type of situation. Water is always a concern, like it is in the San Luis Valley, but also we have the pressure from development and urbanization, I guess, of of where we're at. So part of the reason why we started the malt house in 2016 was to get more value out of what we're growing on the farm, and basically just getting a premium from what we're growing and get more revenue per acre, because we know that acreage is continuing to shrink. And so we've basically succeeded at that. It's always difficult when you're running a small business, like anyone would know. Anyways, we also in 2020 started really heavy into regenerative practices. We've always done a lot of crop rotations, but there was still pretty extensive tillage that we were doing, a lot of like disc ripping. We stopped moldboard plowing probably early 2000s. So not turning over the ground and probably doing as much as disturbance as a lot of the neighbors are doing, but just with the concern of water mostly, and seeing just kind of drought conditions continuing to increase, I was like, well, how are we going to have some resilience in our soil? How are we going to continue to raise a high quality barley crop with limited water resources? And so the quality of the barley is super important in brewing. A lot of people probably don't understand that, and I didn't even understand that when we were selling barley to Coors for many, many years. But the protein level in barley, which is increased from stress, which is typically drought conditions, is something that you really have to combat. And when your protein gets too high, it really affects things in the malt house, and then it'll affect the brewery further down the line. So you can't have high protein barley is really what it comes down to, because no one's going to buy that. So that's when we really started down this process of regenerative farming. So we're now have implemented cover crops on pretty much every single acre that we farm. Currently, right at this moment, none of our fields don't have cover on them. And we've got a living root, except for it frosted, so some of this stuff's going to start to die, but there's literally no bare ground on any of the 1,500 acres that we're currently farming. So pretty excited about that. I mean, you can tell which fields we're managing in the area just because of that. And so with this, I mean, it's been my goal over the last few years of just like proving that we are making a difference. We are sequestering more carbon. We are actually doing what regenerative ag is, and what the point is, right? We're starting to have more resiliency in our soil. We're starting to see we're actually sequestering carbon, which Luke is going to go into later, that like it's actually happening, which is pretty cool to see. And that will in turn hopefully add more value to what we're growing, because I guess what we have found, and I'll let Luke talk about this more, is that we are carbon negative actually. So which is pretty amazing to find out. So they took in all of our inputs, just broad overview here, and kind of looked at everything that we're doing as far as our passes across the field, our inputs and everything, and come to find out what we are growing is actually carbon negative, which is a big deal to me, but I don't know if the consumers actually care about it at this point, but I believe they will in the future. So like we are like a pretty small scale when it comes to the overall barley production in the United States, but at least it's small sample size to show the rest of the industry, the nation, the world, or whatever, that it is possible. So I think that's about all I got. I think I covered most of it, and then Luke's going to get into the weeds a lot more than me. So
Thank you, Todd. Before I do, can I get this to focus? Oh, not really focusing, but it's a bottle of Root Shoot whiskey. It's my second bottle. So if anyone is a whiskey drinker in the crowd, I highly recommend. Bit of a shameless plug for Todd and the team, but I had to go to a couple of different bottle shops to actually find it because the first couple had sold out. It's delicious. So you can really sort of almost taste the climate smart regenerative practices in it. So it does, at least anecdotally for me, and technically through this project, stack up that the work they're doing on farm is resulting in a high quality product as well, for the consumer at the end of the day. So that was the farm. Thank you, Todd. Now, what I'm going to jump into for a couple of slides is more about the supply chain and some of the motivators for Todd's clients, New Belgium, the brewers and what have you. I will come back to the project and some of the specific findings, but to bury the lead, as Todd touched on, what we found in this project was at least cradle to gate. So what that is at the farm level. We're not going beyond farm gate into the malt house, but at the farm level, Todd's team are sequestering more carbon than they're emitting, which is incredible. And that's for a number of reasons. The cover cropping is absolutely helping, but also switching out synthetics for biologicals, removing tillage from their practices. All of these are stacking up to really reduce the emissions and really boost the removals or the sequestration of carbon. I'm going to touch on why that's so important for a supply chain partner or a brand now. And what we can start off with is looking at the screen here and really just looking at the direction of this chart in front of us. This chart is showing you major agricultural disasters due to climate that have taken place in Colorado over the last 44 years. And the main takeaway is that the chart's going up. They're getting more severe. It's a combination of drought, hail, flood, depending on where you are across the state. But it's a major risk to agricultural or brands that rely on agriculture. They're looking at this and going, crap, it's getting harder and harder to source from this region because we are losing more and more supply due to climate change. So there's a major supply chain risk that's taking place. It has a true economic risk to it as well. And supply chains are basically looking at this pyramid. And when I just want to reiterate, when I say supply chains, think of New Belgium, Sierra Nevada, Molson Coors, Anheuser-Busch, and also think of the Nestle's and the Mars and the other CPGs in the world. But what they're looking at is, as companies that rely on agriculture, if their supply chain, if their suppliers are seeing their soil degrade due to various reasons, could be practices or it could be climate, either way, it will result in a yield decline, which disrupts their supply chain. So they have to now change their sourcing strategies. They might have to source part of their product from one state versus another state, et cetera, et cetera. That has a cost to it. That also has a reliability risk to it where they can't guarantee that their product will make its way to the shelf. So now they risk the public perception of their company. Plus, this all builds towards a public net zero target failure. A lot of these brands have commitments that they've made publicly towards net zero or sort of climate smart sustainability, etc. And if they fail to reach those targets in the public domain, there is that sort of sort of public sentiment risk involved. Not to mention, depending on the market you're in, there might be regulatory risk as well. So you can really see that quite quickly, due to their reliance on farmers like Todd and Sarah, these supply chain companies have a lot of risk at stake, and they really have a vested interest in the performance of their suppliers from that sort of soil resiliency perspective. And I think the former Mars CEO, Grant Reed, he summed it up pretty well when he said that regenerative farming is a key part of the solution to climate change and supply chain pressures. He's really recognized and kind of called it out for everyone that we have to be working with our suppliers. And that's, we'll just say, that's kind of part of a broader strategy of our project, is to get this data together to then engage the bigger brewers out there on these sort of shared collaborative projects. Because, as we know, if we flip things around and we sort of look at the sort of the farmer perspective and the positive perspective, if we do drive regenerative practices, climate smart practices that restore soil health, we now see this cascading benefit where we go up into reliable farm productivity. You know, a regenerative farm can store more water so it can make its way through a drought better than a conventionally managed farm, generally speaking. Regenerative farms have better water infiltration rates. So if there is a flood, the water will make its way through the soil rather than washing away all of your topsoil. These are the sorts of benefits that we see with regen. We see it at Olander Farms. And these are the sorts of benefits that really, if we can coordinate landscape scale regeneration, then we're going to see all these benefits sort of compound. Imagine a flood shed where all of the farms are regeneratively managed. Imagine the topsoil that can be retained when there is a flooding event. They're the sorts of things that we really want to see coordinated. And all of this, again, it builds up towards business value realization for the brand, for the brewer, but also for the farmer themselves, getting recognized for the great work that they're doing. And again, another quote that I quite like, it's from Dr. Honeycutt, now former CEO at the Soil Health Institute, really just discussing that soil organic carbon is fundamental to regen ag. And that's important because that's what Downforce does. We do soil organic carbon monitoring. We've developed a US patented model that basically combines publicly available soil samples and environmental surveys with remote data from the Sentinel satellite missions. Our patent is on how we fuse that data together and also on how we classify land using 20 different environmental factors. We classify every 10 square meter pixel of land into its own class so that we can understand more about that soil and how that soil is going to behave, historically speaking, and how it might behave into the future as well. And so all that modeling that kind of comes into play in our web application that you see here. And really the output is how much carbon have you stored in the soil in the top 12 inches at a 10 square meter resolution every 10 days from 2017 all the way up until present. So we get that really nice 8-year snapshot, which means, you know, in the case of Olander, we can capture how was the soil carbon stocks before versus after the regen transition. We can really see that journey and that growth over time. Our modeling is backed by an ISO 14064 standard, which might not mean much to people on this call, but these corporates, the supply chain actors, they are all signed up to, or the vast majority of them are signed up to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Land Sectors Removals Guidance as their sort of guiding framework for reporting on greenhouse gas emissions. ISO 14064 is a verification standard that plugs into the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So when, you know, name the big global brewer, when they come along and say, hey, Todd, we've got these commitments to be net zero by 2050 and et cetera, Todd can turn around and say, hey, well, my farm's been assessed in accordance with ISO 14064. The findings were what we see on the screen here. We've been found to be carbon negative. We've been found to be removing over 4,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent from our farm every year. our barley has been found to be removing between 2.6 and about 14 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent for every pound of barley, so ton of barley. So that's really positioned Todd to be in a really strong, favorable position with these brewers who have these commitments. So that's kind of, I guess, what the goal was of this project, is to come in, have a look at the farm, have a look at Olander Farms. You can see it's sort of the different fields up on the screen here. Understand the state of the soil. How healthy is it? How does it compare to like-for-like soils? It compares very well. In fact, it was best in class. It got an 84% attainment score, which means it's better than 84% of like-for-like soils. We call that best in class. Understand the climate impact. How much carbon is it removing compared to its emissions through farm operations? As we said, it's removing more carbon than it is emitting, which is fantastic. Let's have a look at the quality. So we work with New Belgium there to run the barley through the brew house. It shot the lights out. It performed really well in the brew house. And now we've got a resilient malt barley product that is net negative and it's a high quality. So it's the sort of win-win-win, so to speak. And now we're working with New Belgium and engaging with the American Malt Barley Association, Craft Brewers Association, all of the industry associations to get the story out there of how climate smart barley production can result in not only a superior product, but also a product that's more resilient and better for the climate as well. So I guess to recap, there is the amazing work that Todd and Emily have done on farm over the last 5 or so years and continue to do. That has been recognized through Downforce Technologies modeling and reporting. And now we're engaging with the likes of New Belgium to really sort of expand that message and get more climate smart barley out there in the world. I think that should just about capture everything. Are there any questions? I might just stop sharing so I can see everyone.
Yeah, and Luke, I can read off the questions in the chat as they come in. Peter asks, have you considered carbon credit sales, and do you use biochar to increase yield and higher levels of water storage in the soils? And then a note about it also generates USDA rebates for application of biochar. So Todd, I think that's more of a question for you.
Currently, no. We have explored that, but it seems like biochar is pretty expensive, and as far as like what you actually can retain from applying it. Not opposed to it if there is a way to do it, but not currently. So we've been applying our own compost that we've been making just with dairy manure. We're also applying vermicast tea on the alfalfa field. We're also applying that when we plant every single time. We're using the biological fish hydrolysate to go in furrow every time we plant. So taking different, maybe those aren't carbon sources, obviously, but trying to increase the fungal activity in the soil. And then we're using the stripper head from to when each time we harvest our barley or wheat or anything like that. So you're leaving all that carbon in place. So we're getting carbon from that. And as far as the carbon credits, kind of went down that road for a couple years and not interested in that either. I know that's not the what Luke and their company is trying to accomplish either. Right?
Yeah, and I might totally. I might just add on top of that with the carbon markets. It's a tricky one, right? The voluntary carbon market's been through 3 or so years of pretty bumpy period. It seems like it's sort of steadying out now, and some companies are starting to get a bit more confidence back in the voluntary market, which I think is overall a positive thing. But for agriculture, and 4 soil carbon credits, the fact that under most methodologies, you're looking at a 25-year long contract and a 25-year additional permanence period. So you could be looking at a 50 years worth of commitment. That's a pretty hard pill to swallow. Some scenarios it works, other scenarios maybe not. So what we're hoping to see a lot more of, and what I think would be a fantastic outcome in this project would be more of an insetting arrangement where it's more year to year. It's a bit more dynamic. It's a bit more based around sourcing strategies. And so a brewer buys malt barley from Olander farms, and they basically get the scope 3 benefit of this carbon negative malt barley. But they don't sign up to a 25-year long carbon crediting process, right? What you can negotiate there is price premiums, because they're not having to make up for the emissions that other suppliers might have. So it's a bit more dynamic. I think it's a bit more realistic, to be honest. But I think the more solutions, the better. So I certainly hope the soil carbon market picks up and there's more options out there for growers.
Excellent, guys. Thanks for those responses. There's another question from Jody about what is the single grain used in the whiskey. And just as a note, I did put a link to Root Shoot Spirits so you guys can see where you can buy it yourselves and get more information about it.
Thanks for the plug, Luke. So anyways, it is all barley. So that's what's in it. So it's American single malt. So that means it has to be all barley and it has to all be malted. It does not mean that it has to be a one single malt, which any of you probably don't know what that is. But anyways, there's different kilning methods to get different flavors out of the barley malt itself. And so the whiskey has like 5 different types of malt in the whiskey, but it's all made from barley. If that makes sense.
Perfect. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat right now. But if anybody has another question that they just want to come off mute for, please do. And otherwise, while we're waiting, Barb, maybe you can help me if you see anybody raise their hand. But I think while we're waiting for some more questions, I might also just jump in and direct folks to the funding opportunity where all these projects were funded through. So all the information is listed on the CDA website under the Climate Smart Markets program. And I'm going to drop that link in the chat. So we opened up this funding opportunity for a second time just a few weeks ago. The deadline is the end of October, so it's October 29th. And we will have a little bit more dollars available this round. We have up to $120,000. Each individual project can ask for up to $30,000. We can do less as well, but the maximum is $30,000 per project. And all these projects that you just heard from and all these great presenters are perfect examples of the types of projects that we're looking for. We're really looking for projects that drive development and increase sales for agricultural products, give a premium back to the producers, expand consumer education and knowledge of these products, do any type of research and development for a new product. There's so many options. And if you go to that link, there is another link over to the actual solicitation, which has the details about all the required elements of a proposal, but also the preferred aspects, so the preferred qualifications. And I'll sort of just leave it there as broad. If you have questions about it, there's an email on the website, and you can email that contact with any of your questions, and then we will publish all the answers to questions that are asked. Yeah, just really want to thank all these presenters. They've gone above and beyond with their participation in this project in the first round and sharing their information, sharing their successes. And it's just such a wonderful opportunity to see what's possible for developing this market space. And with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Barb.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. We did have one more question that came up in the chat. Ezekiel is asking, first he says, great presentation, and I second that. Really good job, you guys. What are the biggest challenges that you have to get the funding, that you have found to get funding? Maybe any of you guys want to answer that.
Probably the amount of time that it takes to fill out all of the paperwork and things. So the CDA is great, actually. I really appreciate how simple a lot of your applications are. And yeah, so we're just thankful for that we live in Colorado and there's actually some funding available, because on the national level, we know that it's not.
Yeah, I think I might just add to that from a small startup perspective, time for sure, but that's nothing compared to the grower perspective when, you know, they're out on the field and trying to get back in the office to fill out applications. I second that the CDA process was much more streamlined than pretty much anything else I've seen. But I think it's related to Sarah's comment in the notes as well, kind of about the carbon market and the amount of time it takes to set up a project. You then kind of go, wow, the time I've spent to set a project up or maybe apply for a different grant, you then kind of figure out the hourly rate almost, and you go, holy shit, I'm getting paid like $1 an hour. So yeah, often I think it is the time required. Though for the climate smart markets expansion, I think it was much more streamlined.
Yeah, same. Someone recently, we get asked about the value added producer grant a lot, you know, just like, oh, you guys would be a perfect fit. And we just kind of like exhale, you know, or like laugh. Like this one we did only because, you know, sort of Jake and Jess took the lead and said, is there anything that we can help you guys get? Like, we'll take the lead on writing the grant with Madeline, who wrote it. So it was literally like 10 of us working on this. And we gave a little bit of our, you know, our farmer time. But for me, yeah, time, right, is our hardest resource and asset. So being able to think of what you specifically need, putting the value on that, and then writing the grant, and then getting it or not getting it, which is like a huge bummer, right? And let down, and then managing the funds, and then doing the project and following up on the project. And so really thinking through it intentionally, and making sure you sort of have all those kind of ducks in a row. But I do think the teamwork, obviously Todd and Luke, you know, put a lot of time and energy into this together, and us working with Jake and Jess and Madeline, who helped write the grant. But yeah, a lot more happened behind the scenes. But it definitely was streamlined with, yeah, Amanda and the CDA. I'm really, really grateful for Colorado and the CDA supporting farmers like Olanders and us multi-generational farmers trying to do better, right? Trying to use the knowledge. For me, that's the definition of regenerative. Todd and I have talked about that a lot, and the words come up a lot, but it's really trying to do better with the information that we have and trying to make our soil and our aquifers better for our current generation and the future generations.
Yeah, really well stated. I'd just be curious. I don't see any other questions. I'd just be curious to hear from each of you. What would your advice be to anybody listening or that will watch this about applying for this next round?
Maybe while you guys are thinking, I'll just mention that, these two projects are examples of a lot of collaboration, which often can be challenging in itself because that takes time and energy. But one of the things that we've found, especially in the first round, were that if people were already working on a project that aligned with these values, that gave them the great head start, and also just validity on our side that this is a project that would be able to go through to fruition and get the deliverables done. If they had already invested some time and energy into it, then it was more likely to succeed. And so that's something that I'll just point out. I think it's easier if you have something in the works and you can find a way, you can see how it aligns with this funding. That's going to be just an easier lift all the way around. And then I'll hand it over to the actual recipients to hear what their advice is.
I might just kick things off. Just from my perspective, I think sort of having a good hard think about what your goals are and where you are in your climate smart journey. Are you developing a product and wanting to, work on the R&D almost to get a more finalized product, or have you already completed a lot of climate smart practices and have a product that you want to take to market? That was more sort of the project that we had. But I think just sort of really having a think about where are you at on your journey, and where could, $30,000 worth of funding, which is really significant, where is that going to be most effective for you? I guess that would be my one thought.
Yeah, and I think that was good advice about like having something in the works. I mean, Luke and I had an introduction is all, and then we had a very small conversation with New Belgium. And then this opportunity came up as far as the funding goes. And we said, well, that seems like that's going to fit great. Otherwise, wouldn't have the opportunity to actually go through this whole process. So, yeah. And Luke was the lead on most of this. So he did a lot of the heavy lifting. And Emily, which is not here, but she's always behind the scenes. So.
Todd, and I think that's a really good point that you had, your in the works process was that you guys had a conversation, and this happened to be the right timing, right place, everything sort of came together. So it doesn't have to be something maybe that you've spent a year or more on. It could be, just that you've made these connections, and, you see some possibility with utilizing these funds. So it doesn't it can be, somewhere on that timeline of, in development, you've started talking about it, you've met some partners, you think you can do something, or you could be in the middle of something and you need an influx of cash to bring it all the way across the finish line. And so we're really open to what these projects can be. I think, we are very, very open. We added a new preferred element to the list so that you can see that there's, more and more types of projects that are eligible for this.
Yeah, I like I'm going to throw out some cheesy one-liners like, proof is in the pudding, or rising tides lifts all boats. I think that we've all kind of proven that we've done projects. We're not like phase one, where it's like, oh, I want to do chickens, but I've never worked with chickens before and I don't know anything about that. But this is like money that I want and I want to start this. This is sort of the last mile, I feel like, just getting it across the finish line, or something that can bring about helping, a specific community or a specific market, and working with a handful of different people to make that happen. Or one analogy would be like a bottleneck, right? Like, we've got this product, we need to get it here, but we have this little speed bump right here that we just can't get across. And, getting this piece of equipment or these 10 things is not our priority right now. But if we did have this funding, it would be a priority. And this would have a huge impact on, the market, nutrition, water, helping the local bakery, helping the local community, and helping the local farmers. So really checking, as many boxes as possible. And something you're passionate about too. I think that the passion, which the Olanders, I'm jealous of sometimes. Their social media is incredible. They seem to have so much fun, work hard, but you see all that they're doing. And they do an incredible job of that storytelling piece. And so I think when you are writing the grant, that passion and excitement comes through, as well as checking the not as sexy boxes, like carbon and data and stats and the funding and the money. I mean, those are very, very important. But the passion is really important too, and the fun. Good job, Olanders. And Luke, you make it all look very fun. And you guys are awesome. Keep it up.
Great feedback and great advice. Well, do we have any more questions for our presenters or for Amanda concerning the actual application process? Well, feel free to reach out to any of us. We can certainly help you.
I wanted to mention Susan's emails still at the bottom of the page.
On which page, Jody? I'm sorry.
Oh, geez. Okay, I'll text you on the side. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. It should have been updated on the website, but maybe if you have the website saved as a bookmark, sometimes it doesn't refresh properly. But let me know if you see it elsewhere. I'm also going to, even though this is on the webpage, I'm linking the case study that Downforce, Root, Shoot, and New Belgium put together. Because as Sarah was saying, some of, the storytelling is so important. And this is a great example of some of the storytelling that can be shared. Like, this is a case study, and take a look at sort of what the challenge was, what we did as a collaborative group, what the results were, and some of the data around that. So that is again on the website, but that's a quick link as well. Awesome, Sarah. Thanks for putting in your rye resurgence too.
Well, excellent. Well, everybody, don't forget to keep checking out all of our webinars for Colorado Proud. Our next webinar will be November 17th, and we are going to be talking about our new Spanish logo for Colorado Proud. With our great diversity in our state, we're looking to expand that and help Colorado Proud meet all of our needs. So stay tuned to see that information. Sarah commented, see you at the Colorado Grain Summit in Salida on March 7th, is it? Yep, March 7th. Wonderful. Well, I can't thank you guys enough. And I know your time is very valuable, and you took a lot of it to share all this with us today. And thank you. It was very, very informative. I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and we'll get this posted as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks so much to all our presenters.
Thanks, Sarah. Cheers, Todd.